welcome to all of you, to all the faculty members, all the research scholars, and all the students from on behalf of AAPG Punjab University Student Chapter. We are gathered here to attend the second meeting of Geo-Occurrism. Today we have Shreya Mehta from MSc second year Punjab University Chandigarh. She's gonna have a talk on the topic paleoclimatic reconstruction based on using oxygen isotopic ratios. She did this work in her internship at PRL. So I welcome you, Shreya. So over to you, Shreya. You can start.
Thank you, Manisha. Thank you so much. A very good afternoon to one and all present here. First of all, I'd like to thank the entire team of AAPG and especially my friend and colleague Manisha for inviting me here and giving me this opportunity to present this talk in front of you. And thank you everyone for joining. So without wasting much time, I would like to present my talk. Uh, I'm sharing my screen. Please, Manisha, be connected so that I may know if everything is going well.
Yeah, Shreya, I'm there.
Yeah, can you see my screen
Yeah. We can see your screen. We can see the
as
PPT.
well as my PPT? Okay, so I'll make it full
Yeah,
screen. Uh,
it's
uh,
going on.
I hope my voice is clear. So,
Yeah, you're perfectly audible.
okay, fine. Okay, now I'm going to start.
Okay,
So,
good luck.
one of the topic that fascinated me the most is the evolution of Earth through time. And we have identified diverse climatic conditions and temperature variation for past few thousand years as well as upcoming million years. So the key aspect here is that in identifying these past changes is that the present is the key to the past. So let me explain this statement to you in simple terms. Consider, example, a process of evaporation. So if you have higher temperatures, definitely then you will have higher rate of evaporations, and eventually there will be an increase in salinity in seawater. Now this process is operating today, and this process operated in the past too. But we don't know at what rate. So if somehow we are able to calculate that at what rate this evaporation process was going on in the past, we can actually interpret the temperature conditions at that time. And to do so, we use the tools of paleoceanography to quantify the variation in these variables in the past. Now, climatology is a very vast topic. And so, from this very vast topic today, I'm going to talk to you about how to reconstruct paleosalinity using the oxygen isotopes and what are its implications. That is, why is there a need to reconstruct the paleosalinity and what observations we can deduce from reconstructing paleosalinity. Now, we all know paleoclimatology is the study of past climate. And since it is not possible for us, it is not feasible for us at present time to go into the past and look at what climates were like. So what scientists do is they look for the imprints, which we call as proxies, to interpret the paleoclimate. These proxies include diverse materials such as your pollen grains, glacial sediments, tree rings, ice cores, and microfossils such as foraminifera. Here, I'm going to discuss with you how these microfossils, especially these foraminiferas, are employed to reconstruct the past climate condition such as your temperature and salinity. So before we move forward, let me discuss briefly with you what these foraminiferas are and give you a general idea that why we use them as a proxy. So foraminifera, these are single-celled eukaryotic protists, and they are dominantly marine, but few species can be found in fresh water as well as in brackish water. They occur at various depths in the oceans. They are planktonic, that is free swimming, as well as benthing. An important factor, an important thing about foraminifera is that they secrete the shell, which we sometimes refer to as test, which is made up of calcium carbonate. And the size varies from zero point 0.1 to 1 millimeter. At present, we have about 4,000 living species of foraminifera in the world, which makes them one of the most diverse group of shelled microorganisms. So now you may ask that how they are helpful to reconstruct the past climate. The answer lies in the calcium carbonate shell, which is secreted in equilibrium with the seawater, and thus it helps to capture the imprints of the seawater at that time. I will discuss this topic in detail in next section. And besides this, the foraminiferas are very diverse. They have high numerical density, and they are preserved excellently in the environment. So this makes them as a viable candidate for to be used as for a proxy. Now, this is just an animation to show you that how this calcium carbonate is precipitated in the seawater by these foraminifera. So, what these foraminifera do is they collect these material from the surrounding water and they stack them together to form calcium carbonate, thereby preserving the imprints of seawater chemistry in their shell. So, of all these elements, I'm going to focus only on your oxygen isotope, that how we can use it to decipher the environment in which this calcium carbonate shell was precipitated. But scientists also use calcium in many species of foraminifera. This calcium is replaced by magnesium, and the magnesium calcium is to magnesium ratio of a foraminifera is temperature dependent, which actually forms the basis of paleothermometry using these foraminiferas. So I'm not going to discuss that in detail. So let's get back to the oxygen isotopes. So oxygen, you know, it is one of the most abundant element on our Earth surface, and it has three stable isotopes: oxygen 16, oxygen 17, and oxygen 18. The percentage abundance of oxygen 16 is 99.757, that is, it is the most abundant. Then your oxygen 17 is 0.038%, and oxygen 18 is 0.205%. So what we do is we measure the ratio of least abundant isotope to the most abundant isotopes in our natural samples. And in case of oxygen, we take the ratio of O18 is to O16. Now, this ratio of O18 is to O16 is highly variable in natural samples. This is because of the process called isotopic fractionation. Now, you may ask, what is isotopic fractionation? In simple terms, I can say that whenever a chemical reaction is taking place, one of the isotope is preferred more as compared to the other. Like in a particular reaction, oxygen 16 will be preferred more as compared to the oxygen 18. So their ratio will change when this process is going on, and from these ratios we will use these ratios to interpret how we interpret the past climate. So now you may ask, what is the reason for this isotopic fractionation? Why oxygen 16 will go more or oxygen 18 will go more? So the reason is the difference in the reactivity of oxygen 18 and oxygen 16. So oxygen 18, you know, is heavy as compared to oxygen 16. Due to its heavier nature, it will have less energy, and hence it will be less reactive. Whereas oxygen 16, being a lighter molecule, a lighter isotope of oxygen, it has more vibrational energy and hence will be more reactive. Now, if you look at the graph here, it gives you the amount of dissociation energy that will be required to break the bonds with a light isotope and a heavy isotope. So if you see here, the energy that is required to break the bond for the light isotope is much less as compared to the heavier isotope. So the rate of the reaction of your light isotope will always be greater than that of your heavier isotopes. Now, these isotopic fractionation do not impart huge variations in isotopic concentration. So what this means is If you see the percentage abundance of oxygen 16 and oxygen 18, you see that oxygen 18 has a very low abundance. So whenever you will calculate this ratio of oxygen 18 upon 16, you will get a very small value, which you will find very insignificant. So to overcome this problem, what we do is we subtract the oxygen 18 is to oxygen ratio of our sample with a reference, or we say it as a standard, and we express it in parts per thousands or parts, or we say per mil. Fine. So in case of water, the standard that we use is VSMO, that is Vienna Standard Mean Oceanic Water. So if you have a value of delta 18O equal to plus 10 per mil, you will say that your sample is enriched as compared to your standard. And similarly, if you have a value of delta 18O as minus 10%, you will say that your sample is depleted in oxygen 18 as compared to your standard. Now, let us see how this isotopic fractionation occurs in our hydrological cycle. Now, again, this is a simple animation showing you the oxygen 18 and oxygen 16 isotope that are present in water. So what happens during evaporation is that the oxygen 16 preferentially goes into the vapor phase, while oxygen 18 does not. Now again, this can be explained on the basis of the previous slide which I showed you. If you see this graph, the dissociation energy curve. So whenever you try to break the bond of hydrogen and oxygen 16, less amount of energy is required, whereas more energy will be required to break the bond of hydrogen and oxygen 18. Hence, the vapor phase will always be enriched in oxygen 18, whereas the water that is left behind will always has more concentration of oxygen 18. So if you calculate the delta values for vapor and water, you will find that the delta 18O of vapor is always less than that of delta 18 of water. So now coming back to your foraminifera, as I showed you earlier, that how it precipitates calcium carbonate from the seawater. Now you can see the carbon dioxide and water that it takes up from the carbon dioxide and water it takes up contains oxygen, and the same and we see that the isotopic fractionations are also of the same type of isotopic fractionation occurs during the precipitation of calcite also. And this isotopic fractionation was first noted by Urey in 1948. And he also noted that this isotope fractionation is temperature dependent. And this concept of temperature dependence of isotopic fractionation of calcite later laid on the foundation of paleotemperature studies using the foraminifera. What I'm trying to say is, if we analyze the oxygen isotopes of foraminifera, we can actually determine the oxygen isotope of the seawater at that time, and using the oxygen isotope of seawater, we will reconstruct the paleosalinity. Now coming to the paleosalinity reconstruction. So the fundamental assumption on which the paleosalinity reconstruction is based is that the delta 18O of seawater and salinity co-vary linearly and is constant through space and time. It simply means that if delta O18 is more, your salinity will also be more. If delta 18O is less, then your salinity will also be less. That is, they both vary linearly. And using this fundamental assumption, this Stack and his group in 1993 gave the equation for paleosalinity reconstruction. Here you can see the S star is your past local salinity, S is the present local salinity, delta 18F is the major deviation between your modern and the past values of planktonic foraminifera. The variable A represents your variation of global seawater delta 18O, and B is the slope of delta 18O versus temperature relationship. And C is the most important variable here that I'm going to discuss with you, and it is basically the slope of this delta 18 of seawater and salinity relationship. Now we will see how on what factors the slope of this delta 18O of seawater and salinity relationship depends. So these two factors, that is your delta 18O of seawater and salinity, these are controlled by your hydrological conditions such as your evaporation, precipitation, continental runoff, advection, and diffusion. Fine. So when I said that they both go very linearly. What I meant is, as I told you earlier, that delta 18O increases with increase in evaporation, and so does the salinity. If you increase evaporation, salinity will also increase, and delta 18 of seawater will increase. And the precipitation again is depleted in delta 18 or delta 18O. So higher precipitation will have low delta 18O values, and again due to the dilution effect it will have low salinity. Same goes for continental runoff also. And the processes of advection and diffusions are quite complicated, so they also vary these two factors to a great extent. So, an important point that I'd like to point out here is that the slope and intercept of this delta 18O and salinity relationship might vary seasonally and geographically. As you know, these controlling factors such as your season, climate, and location, these also keeps varying. So, this may cause an error in paleosalinity reconstruction, as our fundamental assumption said that the relationship between the two variables should be constant, but somehow we think that due to the changing hydrographic conditions, hydrological conditions, the relationship might also vary. So let us have a look at the delta 18O seawater and salinity relationship in Arabian Sea and Bay of Bengal. The figure 3 basically shows just the sample locations from where the samples were collected for the analysis. And if you want to see this data, you can look for it in online. The source is given below. Then figure 4A and B shows your plotted data of salinity and delta 18O respectively. One thing that you will see in this figure 4A is that there is a great salinity contrast between the Bay of Bengal and the Arabian Sea. The salinity in Bay of Bengal ranges from around 32 to 34 PSU, whereas for Arabian Sea it is around 34 to 36 PSU. Now, the difference for this great salinity contrast is in the difference in the rate of evaporation. The rate of evaporation in Arabian Sea is much higher as compared to the rate of the evaporation in uh, Bay of Bengal, and also the amount of freshwater flux that Bay of Bengal receives is much greater than the amount of fresh water that is received by your Arabian Sea. These are the reasons that actually leads to the difference in the salinity in these two basins. Now, coming to your delta 18O, now the similar behavior is shown by the delta 18O. Here also you see that the delta 18O values for Arabian Sea is greater as compared to that of Bay of Bengal, which again can be attributed to your high evaporation in Arabian Sea and higher freshwater flux that enters into your Bay of Bengal from your Ganga Brahmaputra basin. Now, when we plot this delta 18O and salinity data, we have here, this is a figure that I have taken from a research paper, and they have plotted these data for various time periods. As you can see, some for March, April, this is basically for pre-monsoon, monsoon, and post-monsoon. Figure A, B, and C basically shows your data for your Bay of Bengal, and D is the data plotted for your Arabian Sea. Now, the first thing to notice here is that the slope of this delta 18O and salinity is quite variable and is estimated to vary between 0.14 to 0.51. The second thing that we noticed here is that we can't find any significant relationship between the delta 18O of seawater and salinity in the Arabian Sea. So we see from here that the slope is highly variable through space and time. Now, these observation actually leads us to question the fundamental assumption on which the paleosalinity reconstruction is based. Now, they said that the delta 18O and salinity has to vary linearly and has to remain constant. But we find that the relationship is not constant. So at present, a lot of research is going on in this field to improve the accuracy of this method. At last, I would like to discuss with you the implications of paleosalinity reconstruction. That is why there is a need to reconstruct the paleosalinity. So the first one is very obvious, that we infer the past changes in the salinity. Second is that we study the past oceanic dynamics. That is how hydrological cycle operated in the past. As you know, it is dependent on whole evaporation, precipitation, and runoff balance, which we can actually interpret from the paleosalinity reconstruction. Now, the third is the most widely used application of this paleosalinity reconstruction. That is, we investigate the past monsoon variability and the strength of the monsoon, which is again directly related to the precipitation, runoff, and evaporation budget. So, this Rostek and his group actually reconstructed the past monsoon for Indian Ocean, I think till 7,000 years. And they also determined the strength of the monsoon during this time period on the basis that if you have a low salinity, then obviously it means that the rate of precipitation and runoff was high, which means that the monsoon strength was strong. But if you have higher salinity, it means a larger evaporation, less precipitation, and hence the monsoon strength was weak. And the last implication is retracing past thermocline circulation. Now, this is very limited application of paleosalinity reconstruction, and again in this research is being carried out in this field too, to reconstruct past thermocline circulation. We know that this thermocline circulation is density dependent, and which is in turn dependent on the salinity. So we can use the salinity to retrace the past thermocline circulation. And if you want to know more about this what are these implications of paleosalinity reconstruction, you can refer these papers that I have mentioned here. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Shreya, for this awesome talk on paleoclimatic proxies, paleosalinity reconstruction using these proxies. And meanwhile, we lost a chance to welcome Patnaik sir. So we extend a very warm welcome to Patnaik sir. And since he is connected to this subject so closely, if I would like to request Patnaik sir if he can share his remarks on this lecture series. Patnaik sir.
Hello, can you hear me?
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, just
yes, sir, we can hear you.
I'll be there soon.
So in the meantime, if you have any questions regarding this topic, ask.
But can you all hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so that was a wonderful talk, Shreya.
Sorry, sir, you are not audible actually. Could you please be more loud?
All right. Now,
Yes, sir.
can you
Now
hear?
it's fine.
Okay,
Yes, sir. Now
okay,
it's fine.
okay. That was wonderful talk.
Thank you so
I
much, sir.
congratulate you on
Uh,
such a nice talk.
Thank you, sir.
Uh, I have just one question
Yes,
that
sir.
how can we apply this very aspect of salinity in
Yes, sir.
lacustrine deposit? Can we use this this technique
Uh,
in lakes?
Sir, I have only worked on Indian Ocean, but I think we can do that because the procedure is almost similar. If we follow the same procedure, it will give us the results. So
Right.
yes,
So
I
so
think
so we can use fossils which are, I mean,
uh,
not necessarily foraminifers. We can use
yes,
other
sir.
fossils.
Yes, sir. We can use diatom. We have diatoms also. We can use corals also. That depends. Whatever fossils we are available with.
Good, good, great.
Yes, sir.
And you said it's because salinity is kind of related to temperature. So we can
Uh,
calculate the temperature. Can we calculate the temperature?
yes, sir. There are actually, I took this topic of salinity, but there is a whole literature on paleo temperature estimation from these fossils. So, yes, sir, we can actually estimate because this isotopic fractionation is temperature dependent. And since actually the fractionation actually increases with decreasing temperature. So, we can estimate using these isotopes that at what temperature the calcium carbonate shell was precipitated. So yes, sir,
Right.
we can use it in
We
daily
can do that.
temperature.
There is a technique called clumped isotopes. Do you know about that? Clumped
No,
isotopes.
no, sir, I'm not. I have
That's
no
a,
idea.
in fact, wonderful way to measure paleo temperature. You should read this,
Yes,
where
sir.
we use all sorts of elements.
So if you're talking about calcium and magnesium ratio of foraminifera,
No, no, no. We for that, see, all these heavy isotopes,
okay,
they kind of occur together at a particular temperature. So in case of clumped isotopes, like in case of for instance, you are doing oxygen isotopes, you look at the ratio between the lighter and the heavier one.
yes, sir.
In clumped, you use calcium isotope, you use magnesium isotope, you use oxygen isotope, you use carbon isotopes, you see.
Yes,
So
sir. Yes.
that is a step further. So that is kind of that would give you very accurate temperatures.
Yes, sir.
So yeah, so you should try to learn about that. And
Yes, sir.
in India we do not have, we just have one lab that
Yes,
works on clumped isotopes, and that is in Indian Institute of Science. So
yes,
if you have any queries or any questions, Professor Prosenjit Ghosh is there,
yes, sir.
with whom Dr. Seema has also worked as a postdoc. So
Yes, sir.
he can, or his students can help you out in understanding clumped isotopes. That's a wonderful way of determining temperature very accurately.
Yes, sir. Thank you,
Great.
sir.
Okay, welcome. Okay, fine. Anybody else? Go ahead. Thank you for this chance to listen to you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you
being
very much,
here.
Patnaik sir. Thank you
Okay,
very much
okay.
for your presence.
Most welcome.
If anybody wants to ask questions, if anybody, you can. Shreya, in the meanwhile, you can share your internship experience with our juniors, like how to approach for internship and all. It will be very helpful for them.
Yeah, sure. Why not? So every year at the time of I think from September to December, various institutes offers you internship programs. The one that I applied for was from I was selected from Indian Academy of Sciences. They, based on my topic, they actually allotted me the institute. So I was given the PRL, that is Physical Research Laboratory. It's in Ahmedabad, and it is okay. Rajkiran has one question.
हेलो
Hello, Rajkiran.
हाँ श्रेया, मेरा क्वेश्चन ये है कि आपने बोला हमारी फंडामेंटल एजम्पशन ये है कि जो डेल्टा O18 है ना, उसका
हाँ जी,
सैलिनिटी के साथ डायरेक्ट रिलेशन है,
हाँ जी,
जिसको हम फंडामेंटली अभी तक ले रहे थे। तो
हाँ जी।
मतलब इस पे अभी काम हो रहा है, इस पे फिर ये तो फंडामेंटल एजम्पशन आप कह रहे हो कि आपके डेटा के हिसाब से अभी स्लोप चेंज हो रहा है उस ग्राफ का।
राजकिरण, मैंने इस पे काम किया है, बल्कि मेरा टॉपिक यही था, टू एस्टिमेट द एरर इन पेलियोसैलिनिटी। सो रिसेंटली हमने एक पेपर भी सबमिट किया है। सो होपफुली अगर वो एक्सेप्ट हो जाता है तो यू विल हैव द रिजल्ट दैट दिस मच ऑफ एरर इज जनरेटेड इन द पेलियोसैलिनिटी रिकंस्ट्रक्शन।
ओके ओके, सो ठीक है
So we
ठीक
had
है ठीक
challenged
है
this
ठीक
assumption there. So if they find it meaningful, so hopefully I will
है।
share
इट
that.
विल बी it will be changed then
Yeah,
according to Indian oceans. For Indian oceans it
yeah.
will be
For
different graph
uh,
used.
no, the actually this assumption is means everywhere scientists are using this assumption. So if our results are true, so this will change the understanding of this paleosalinity everywhere.
Okay, but you have data only from Indian
Yeah,
Ocean now,
yeah.
so
I
how
have
can you
worked on,
generalize it?
yeah, I have only worked for Indian Ocean.
Okay, so that's why I'm saying, so your results will be only limited to India or everywhere? I mean, generalize, you are generalizing it, so is
Yeah,
it
no, it will be
mm,
applicable everywhere because procedure is same, everyone is adopting the same procedure.
ओके ओके ओके, ठीक है, इसके ऊपर
Yeah,
थोड़ा देखना। ठीक है, ठीक, ओके,
yeah.
थैंक यू
Sure.
थैंक यू।
Thank you, Rajkiran. And Pratibha has a question.
Pratibha, you can ask your question.
Yes, please, I want to ask a question.
Yeah.
Is it audible?
No, you are not audible, Pratibha. Can you ask in chat?
Okay, you can write it down in the chat. No falling in Canada.
Pratibha, please ask your question.
Pratibha, I cannot understand. What do you mean by snow falling in Canada? Much less than Florida. See, you have to experimentally determine the exact values, how much it will be depleted in any particular area. So you have to calculate the delta 18 of a sample. You have to analyze it, and for analyzing, we use mass spectrometer. You can always read about it. It is given in any isotope geology book. So I can't say anything on how much less or how much more, but definitely the snow will have delta 18 values less than that of the rain.
Okay, Shreya, if you can continue with your internship experience. If anybody wants to ask questions, you can ask in chat as well, or you can unmute yourself.
So where I was, that I applied for internship program through Indian Academy of Sciences. So every year they give a chance to the students from first year to final year to apply in this internship program. So if you are interested, just choose a suitable topic. Look for the institutes in India if people are working on that project, and then write a suitable write-up and submit it to them. So hopefully they will select you. Otherwise, I think every institute gives you the opportunity for a summer internship program. This year we could not have due to Corona. That's all. What else should I say? You can ask me questions. I don't know what to say.
If anyone wants to ask anything, you can ask.
Can Pelu Salary tell us about Ice Age? Like Ice Ages, why would you? We would not do paleosalinity estimation for Ice Ages. Ice Ages can be directly inferred from your paleo temperature estimations. You can estimate the paleo temperature from delta 18 values, and uh, uh, based on that, you can infer that if temperature, how much lower the temperatures were, how much higher the temperatures were, and based on that, you can estimate your ice ages. At modern times, when you determine the glacial interglacial phase, it is all done on the basis of delta 18O only. So you don't need paleosalinity for that. You need to do paleo temperature estimations. Thank you, Anshul. Anyone else?
I think no more questions are there.
So, thank you very much for attending.
So, on the behalf of AAPG Punjab University Chandigarh, I would like to extend a very thank you to everyone. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Patnaik sir, for your warm presence. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Thank you, Shreya, for your wonderful talk.
Thank you, Manisha, so much. Thank you, everyone, for listening to me for so long, and thank you very much for attending.
So I think we can end this here.
Yeah. Thank you, Manisha. Thank you so much.
Thank